Hey guys, how's it going? Hope you're doing well. My name is Crown, and today I'm going to read you some very interesting stories that I hope that you're gonna love. And now, without further ado, let's go!
My husband travels a lot for his job as a regional sales manager for a construction equipment company. He usually flies out early Monday mornings and comes back Thursday nights. This week he had meetings lined up in Chicago with 3 different clients, so he booked the earliest flight he could find, a 6:30 a.m. departure from Tampa. My husband keeps to himself mostly, but he gets bothered by people being inconsiderate in public spaces. Maybe it comes from all those years of business travel where he's seen every type of rude behavior. He usually just shakes his head and moves on, but this time was different. So he gets on the plane, finds his aisle seat about halfway back, and settles in with his coffee and newspaper. The flight wasn't too crowded, maybe 60% full. Across the aisle from him there's this woman in her 40s with expensive clothes and a big diamond ring. Before they even started taxiing, she was already on her phone. Not a big deal at first, people make last-minute calls all the time. But when the plane started moving and the flight attendants began their safety demonstration, she just kept talking. Her voice was carrying throughout the cabin. Everyone could hear her discussing what sounded like some drama with her sister about a family dinner party. She was going on and on about who said what to whom, completely oblivious to the fact that the flight attendants were trying to do their job. The lead flight attendant, a pleasant older woman, started the safety presentation. You know, the usual stuff about seat belts, oxygen masks, emergency exits. Important information that could literally save your life. But Karen just kept chattering away like she was in her living room. Other passengers started looking around at each other with annoyed expressions. A few people cleared their throats loudly. Nothing worked. She was completely wrapped up in her conversation. The flight attendant walked over to Karen and politely asked her to end her call so everyone could pay attention to the safety presentation. The woman looked up, held up one finger like she was saying just a minute, and kept right on talking. Karen continued her loud phone conversation, telling whoever was on the other end that someone definitely said something bad about their husband, and that she was standing right there when it happened. The flight attendant stood there for a moment, clearly trying to decide what to do. She had a job to complete, and federal regulations require passengers to pay attention during safety briefings. After waiting about 30 seconds, she tried again and told Karen that she really needed her to hang up the phone because it was a federal requirement. Again, Karen just waved her finger dismissively. This time, she actually turned away from the flight attendant, like she was dismissing her entirely. She kept talking about how she told her mom that if she was going to invite certain people to dinner, she needed to seat them at opposite ends of the table. That's when my husband had enough. He told me later that something just snapped in him. Here was this flight attendant, just trying to do her job and keep everyone safe, being completely disrespected by someone who clearly thought the rules didn't apply to her. My husband has what you might call a commanding presence. He's 6'3", played football in college, and when he needs to project his voice in a noisy construction site, everyone stops what they're doing and listens. He decided this woman needed to hear that voice. My husband shouted across the aisle, telling her to shut up in the loudest voice possible. The entire cabin went dead silent. The woman's mouth literally fell open mid-sentence. She just sat there staring at him, phone still pressed to her ear, but no words coming out. Karen asked him if he just told her to shut up, sounding completely shocked. My husband said that yes, he did tell her to shut up. He explained that the flight attendant had asked her twice to end her call and told her to show some respect and hang up the phone. You could hear a pin drop. Everyone was watching to see what would happen next. The woman looked around the cabin and realized that every single person was staring at her, and not in a sympathetic way. Karen told him it was a private conversation and to mind his own business. My husband shot back that her private conversation became everyone's business when she decided to broadcast it to the entire plane and ignore safety instructions. He told her again to hang up the phone. An older gentleman 2 rows up actually started clapping slowly. Then a few other people joined in. Karen crossed her arms and stared out the window, clearly furious, but apparently realizing she wasn't going to win this battle. The flight attendant thanked my husband and then told Karen that she needed to end the call immediately so they could continue with the safety presentation. Finally, the woman mumbled something into her phone and hung up. The rest of the flight was peaceful. The safety presentation continued without interruption, and everyone settled in for the 2.5-hour journey. About an hour into the flight, the same flight attendant came by with the drink service. When she got to my husband's row, she leaned down and spoke quietly to him. She thanked him for his help and said they really appreciated passengers who supported them in difficult situations. Then she handed him a little bag of premium nuts and a voucher for a free alcoholic beverage. She told him these were complimentary and that if he needed anything else during the flight, he should just let her know. My husband said the woman across the aisle shot him dirty looks for the rest of the flight, but he didn't care. Several other passengers thanked him when they were getting off the plane, including an elderly couple who said they were trying to hear the safety instructions because they didn't fly very often. When he called me from Chicago that evening, he was still chuckling about the whole thing. He said he normally wouldn't get involved, but something about her attitude just rubbed him the wrong way. The complete disrespect for the flight attendant and the other passengers was too much to ignore. The woman was one of the first people off the plane when they landed, practically running up the aisle to get away from all the passengers who had witnessed her public embarrassment. My husband and I have been married for 4 years now, and for the most part, we've had a good blended family situation. When we first started dating, he was very clear about boundaries with his daughter from his previous marriage. She was 9 at the time, and he told me she already had 2 parents and didn't need me trying to be a third one. What she needed was someone who could be an advocate and mentor. I respected that completely. His daughter is honestly a great kid. She's 13 now and we get along well most of the time. 2 years ago, we had our son together, my first and only biological child. I had wanted to be a mom for so long, and when he finally came along, I was over the moon. From the moment I knew I was pregnant, I had this vision for his nursery. I spent months planning every detail. I painted 2 walls with this beautiful ombre effect that goes from grass green at the bottom to sky blue, which then transitions into a dusty blue ceiling covered in glow-in-the-dark stars. His ceiling light has a sun-shaped lampshade, and his night light is shaped like a moon. I found this amazing floor bed that looks like a camping tent, got him a grassy green rug, and even found a ball pit designed to look like a little pond. His toy storage is these adorable tree trunk-shaped chests that double as chairs and a table, and his bookshelf is shaped like a tree. Every piece was carefully chosen, and I paid for all of it myself with money I had been saving. When it came time to redo my stepdaughter's room a year later, we took a completely different approach. We asked her what she wanted, and she said she really wanted a cozy reading nook. So we created one with a small round mattress, tons of cushions, in her favorite purple and teal colors, and hung up a mosquito net canopy. She picked out solid paint colors for her walls, purple on one wall, teal on another, and we painted the room together over a weekend. We split the cost 50-50 between my husband and me. The rest of her furniture was stuff my husband had bought years before I came into the picture, and since it was all still in good condition, he saw no point in replacing it. Everything was fine until last month when my son turned 3 and we finished setting up the last pieces of his room. My stepdaughter came in to see it all put together, and her whole mood changed. She looked around with amazement and said his room looked like something from a magazine. I thanked her and told her I was really happy with how it turned out. She stood there looking around for a few minutes, then got this expression on her face and told me I had put way more effort into his room than hers. I asked her what she meant, reminding her that we had worked on her room together and she had picked everything out herself. But she looked at all the fancy painted murals and special furniture in my son's room, then pointed out that her room just had regular paint and the same old furniture she'd had since she was little. I tried to explain that she had chosen those colors and that we had made that beautiful reading nook she wanted. But then she said something that hit me like a punch to the gut, that it was obvious I cared more about him because he was actually mine. I tried to explain that I didn't want to overstep boundaries with her room, that her dad and I had agreed I wouldn't try to parent her, and that she had made most of the design choices herself. But she just got more upset and told me that was just an excuse. She pointed out that I had spent months planning his room and tons of money on all that special stuff, while for hers, I had asked her what she wanted once, and then we painted some walls. She said it wasn't the same at all. She ran to her dad and told him I was playing favorites. When he confronted me that evening, he said she was really hurt and thought I didn't care about her as much as our son. I tried to explain that wasn't true and that I was just trying to respect the boundaries we had set. I reminded him that he had told me she didn't need another parent. He said being supportive and being a parent were two different things, and that I could have put more thought into her space. I said that she had made the choices and that I had asked her what she wanted and we did it together. But then he asked me if I had really asked her what she wanted or if I had just asked her one basic question and gone with whatever she said first. I had to think about that. When I planned my son's room, I researched different themes, looked at hundreds of photos online, visited multiple stores, and really thought about what would make the space special. With my stepdaughter, I had basically asked what she wanted, and when she said reading nook, that's what we did. I didn't push for more details or try to expand on the idea. The situation got worse over the next few days. My stepdaughter started making comments about how I obviously loved my real child more. Her mom even called my husband to complain that I was showing favoritism and making her daughter feel unwanted in our home. That's when my husband's ex-wife decided to get involved directly. She showed up at our house unannounced last Saturday morning and said we needed to talk about how I was treating her daughter. I told her I thought there had been a misunderstanding, but she said there was no misunderstanding at all. She explained that her daughter had told her all about how fancy her half-brother's room was compared to her basic little space, and that I was clearly playing favorites. I tried to explain that I was trying to respect boundaries and that her ex-husband had told me not to try to parent her daughter. She said that there was a difference between parenting and caring, and that any decent person would put equal effort into both kids' spaces. I said that I did put effort in, that we had painted together and made exactly what she had asked for. But Karen shot back that I had asked a 12-year-old what she wanted and then done the bare minimum, while I had spent months planning some perfect room for my precious son. She was really getting under my skin, but I tried to stay calm. Then she told me that I needed to redo her daughter's room properly or she would make sure everyone knew what kind of stepmother I really was. She threatened to post about it online and tell all the other parents at her daughter's school whatever it took to embarrass me. That's when something snapped in me. I realized I had been so worried about overstepping that I had actually understepped. My stepdaughter deserved someone who would advocate for her and make sure she felt just as valued. But this woman threatening me was not the way to fix it. I told her she was absolutely right, that her daughter deserved better, but not from me. When she asked what that was supposed to mean, I explained that I was done trying to navigate everyone else's rules about what I could and couldn't do for her daughter. I suggested that if she thought the room was so inadequate, maybe she should step up and create something amazing at her own house, since she was the actual parent after all. She said that wasn't the point, and that her daughter lived at our house half the time. I pointed out that she also lived with Karen half the time, and it was funny how concerned she was about what I was providing when I didn't hear about her creating any special spaces. I could see her getting angrier, but I kept going. I asked her what she had done for her daughter's room at her own place. Had she painted murals, bought special furniture, created themed spaces? She said it was different because she was the mother and didn't have to prove anything. I asked why I had to prove I cared while also not trying to be a parent, while also respecting boundaries that seemed to change depending on who was upset about what. Karen started yelling that I was twisting things around and that this was about me obviously favoring my biological child. I told her she was right. I did favor my son when it came to decorating his room because I was allowed to be his parent and make decisions about his space without worrying about overstepping or offending anyone. Then I said something that really set her off. I told her that if she wanted her daughter to have an amazing room, she had two options. She could either create one herself at her own house, or she could back off and let me actually care for her daughter without all the restrictions and criticisms. Karen started screaming that I had no right to set conditions and that I was being manipulative. That's when my husband came outside to see what all the yelling was about. When he heard Karen threatening to badmouth me around town and demanding I redo his daughter's room, something shifted in his expression. He told Karen very calmly that she needed to leave our property immediately. When she started to argue, he reminded her that she had no right to show up at our house making demands and threats. He said if she had concerns about our daughter's living situation, they could discuss it through their lawyers like civilized adults. After Karen left in a huff, my husband and I had a long talk with his daughter. We explained that we wanted to redo her room together, but this time I would be more involved in the planning and design process. We would research ideas together, visit stores together, and really think about what would make her space special and uniquely hers. She was excited about the idea, and over the next month, we transformed her room into something amazing. We kept her reading nook but made it even cozier with fairy lights and a canopy bed that looked like a castle. We painted a mural of her favorite book scenes on one wall and installed floating shelves shaped like tree branches for all her books. We got her a desk that looked like an antique writing table and added a vintage trunk for storage that doubled as a window seat. When it was all finished, she said it felt like her own personal fairy tale room, and that she finally understood that I cared about her just as much as my son. Karen tried to cause more drama by posting on social media about what a terrible stepmother I was, but it backfired when other parents started commenting about how lucky the girl was to have someone who cared enough to create such a beautiful space for her. When I first moved here, I worked as a freelance contractor doing home repairs and renovations. The job market was tough back then, and I needed somewhere to store all my tools and equipment safely. My garage was already packed with my car and other stuff, so I decided to build a shed in my backyard. I did everything by the book, got all the proper permits from the city, made sure it met all the building codes, and even had it inspected twice. The shed isn't fancy or anything, just a basic wooden structure where I keep my power tools, lumber, and work supplies. It's functional and sturdy, which is all I needed. The homeowners association here was pretty quiet when I first moved in. Sure, they sent the usual newsletters about keeping lawns trimmed and not parking on the street overnight, but nothing too crazy. That all changed about 6 months ago when Karen got elected as the new president. At first, she seemed normal enough. She introduced herself at the annual meeting and talked about wanting to improve property values and community spirit. But then things started getting weird real fast. It began with her showing up to neighborhood events wearing this cheap plastic crown she apparently bought online. She started calling herself the neighborhood queen and would correct people when they called her by her real name or just president. She demanded that everyone address her as Your Majesty or Queen Karen from now on. She claimed she was the royal leader of the community and expected to be treated such. Most people just rolled their eyes and went along with it because nobody wanted to deal with the drama. But then she started taking her fake royal status way too seriously. She began doing royal inspections of people's properties, walking around with a clipboard and that ridiculous crown, taking notes about things she thought needed fixing. She'd leave these official-looking notices on people's doors with her crown logo at the top. Last month, she showed up at my door with one of these notices. She announced that Her Majesty had deemed my storage shed to be insufficiently cheerful for the royal kingdom. She ordered me to paint it in brighter, more joyful colors immediately. I told her it was just a work shed and was perfectly fine the way it was. I explained that I had all the proper permits for it. She dismissed my concerns completely. She said permits from the city were irrelevant and that royal decrees superseded all other authority. She gave me 2 weeks to make it more cheerful or face what she called royal results. I thought she was just being dramatic and would eventually back off. 2 weeks later, I'm in my backyard working on a project when I hear this commotion in my driveway. I walk around to the front and see Karen standing there in her crown, along with 3 guys carrying sledgehammers and crowbars. I asked what was going on. Karen declared that my time was up and called me a peasant. Since I had refused to comply with royal orders, she announced they were there to remove this eyesore from their kingdom. I told her she couldn't do that. I explained this was my property and that the shed was completely legal. Karen insisted that royal authority trumped my so-called legal documents. She then ordered the guys to begin the demolition. The guys started walking toward my backyard like they were really going to tear down my shed. This was unbelievable. I told them to stop right there. I explained they were trespassing on my property and asked them to leave right now. Karen said they didn't take orders from commoners and told the crew to continue with the royal mission. That's when I'd had enough. I have 2 German shepherds, both rescue dogs that are incredibly well trained but also very protective of our property. They're big boys, probably about 90 pounds each, and they don't mess around when it comes to protecting their home. I gave them a last warning to leave my property immediately or I would release my dogs. Karen scoffed and said my mangy mutts didn't scare royalty. She claimed they had royal business to conduct, so I opened my back door and called for my dogs. They came running out immediately, saw these strangers with tools heading toward their territory, and went into full protection mode. They didn't attack or anything, but they positioned themselves between the crew and my shed, barking loud enough to wake the entire neighborhood. You should have seen how fast those tough guys with sledgehammers dropped their tools and started backing away. But Karen, still wearing her stupid crown, stood her ground for about 10 more seconds. She shouted for me to call off what she called these beasts immediately. She claimed this was an assault on royalty. I explained that the dogs were just protecting their home. I suggested maybe she should leave like I had asked her to 20 minutes earlier. That's when my dogs decided Karen was getting a little too close to their comfort zone. They started moving toward her, still barking. She finally got the message and started backing up, but she was walking backward and not paying attention to where she was going. My sprinkler system had been running that morning, and there was this big muddy patch right near my driveway where the water always pools up. Karen backed right into it, slipped, and went down hard, face first right into the mud, with her crown flying off and landing about 10 feet away. The demolition crew didn't even help her up. They just grabbed their tools and ran for their truck. Karen was lying there in the mud, sputtering and covered head to toe in brown muck. I commented that Her Majesty seemed to have lost her crown. By this point, several neighbors had come out to see what all the noise was about. Someone must have called the police because 2 officers showed up about 5 minutes later. The first cop helped Karen get to her feet while the second one came over to talk to me. After I explained what happened and showed him my permits for the shed, he told me I had every right to protect my property and that Karen and her crew were definitely in the wrong. Karen tried to convince the officers that she had some kind of legal authority as Homeowners Association president, but they weren't buying it. They explained that being president of an association doesn't give you the right to destroy other people's property. One officer told her that Homeowners Association rules couldn't override city permits and property rights. He warned her that she could be charged with trespassing and attempted vandalism. Karen protested that she was the queen of the neighborhood and had royal authority. The officer looked at her covered in mud with her crown missing and suggested maybe it was time to go home and clean up. The officers took a full report, and I ended up filing for a restraining order against Karen the next day. Turns out, this wasn't her first incident. Several other neighbors had already complained about her harassment and threats. The restraining order was approved within a week. Karen had to resign from the Homeowners Association presidency and isn't allowed to come within 100 yards of my property. I'm 19 and still live at home with my parents. My older sister moved back in with us about a year ago after her divorce, bringing her 2-year-old daughter with her. At first, I was happy to help out. I mean, she's my sister and I love my niece. But over the months, I started noticing a pattern that really got on my nerves. My sister has this thing where she'll ask you to watch her daughter for just 2 minutes while she runs to the bathroom. Those 2 minutes somehow magically turn into 20 or 30 minutes every single time. The first few times it happened, I figured maybe she had stomach issues or something. But then I started paying attention. She'd disappear into the bathroom with her phone, and if you listened carefully, you could hear Netflix playing or her talking to friends. One time I even heard her laughing at TikToks. Meanwhile, I'm stuck entertaining a cranky toddler who keeps asking where mommy went. I caught on pretty quick that this was just her way of getting a break from parenting duties. Look, I get it. Being a single mom is tough, but lying about it and trapping people into babysitting isn't cool. So I started saying no whenever she asked. She'd come up to me asking if I could watch her daughter for 2 minutes while she used the bathroom. I'd tell her no because I was busy. She'd insist it was literally just 2 minutes. I'd tell her she could wait 2 minutes until I was done with what I was doing. She'd get all huffy about it, but I wasn't falling for her tricks anymore. My parents thought I was being mean, but they hadn't figured out her game yet. Last Tuesday, I was just hanging out in my room playing video games when she knocked on my door. She asked if I could watch her daughter for 2 minutes because she really needed to use the bathroom. I was about to say no like usual, but I checked the time and realized I didn't have anything important going on. Plus, I did have to leave in about 15 minutes to meet up with some friends at the mall. But 15 minutes seemed like plenty of time for even her extended bathroom breaks. I told her fine, but that I had to leave in 15 minutes to meet my friends. She said that was perfect and she wouldn't be long at all, then thanked me. So I went downstairs and started playing with my niece. She's actually a sweet kid when she's not having a meltdown about her mom disappearing. We were building blocks and watching cartoons, and she seemed happy enough. But then 10 minutes passed and my sister was still nowhere to be seen. I checked my phone. I needed to leave in 5 minutes to make it on time. I sent her a text asking how much longer she'd be, since I needed to leave soon. She texted back promising just 1 more minute. That 1 minute stretched into 3, then 5. Now I was officially going to be late and my friends were already texting asking where I was. I walked upstairs and knocked on the bathroom door. I told her I had to go now and reminded her that I'd told her about my plans. No response. I knocked louder and said hello, telling her I needed to leave. Still nothing. Either she had her noise-canceling headphones on or she was completely ignoring me. Knowing my sister, it could have been either one. I stood there for another minute, getting more frustrated by the second. My friends were blowing up my phone and I was already 20 minutes late. I had two choices: miss my plans entirely or do what I had to do. I went back downstairs to my niece, who was starting to get fussy and asking for her mom. I told her to go upstairs and get mommy, and to tell her that I had to leave. My niece asked where mommy was. I explained that she was in the bathroom upstairs and asked her to go knock on the door and tell her to come out. I grabbed my keys and headed for the door. Behind me, I could hear my niece starting to cry and calling for her mom. I felt bad, but honestly, what was I supposed to do? I'd given my sister fair warning and she chose to ignore it. My niece begged me not to go and ran after me toward the door, crying harder now. It broke my heart a little, but I kept walking. This wasn't my fault, and I wasn't going to let my sister manipulate me into missing my plans because she couldn't stick to her word. When I got home 3 hours later, my sister was waiting for me in the living room, and she looked furious. She asked what was wrong with me and demanded to know how I could just abandon a 2-year-old like that. She said her daughter was hysterical when she came out of the bathroom. I told her I'd said I had to leave by a certain time, and she promised she'd only be a minute. She claimed she was having stomach problems and couldn't help it. I pointed out that she'd been in there for 30 minutes with her phone, and I could hear Netflix playing. She knew she'd been caught. She insisted that wasn't the point, and that you don't just leave a child alone. I told her I didn't leave her alone. I told her to get her mom. I also reminded her that she wasn't my kid. She argued that her daughter was my niece. I agreed but said she was her daughter and I wasn't her babysitter. I also said I definitely wasn't falling for her fake bathroom emergency routine anymore. My parents came home right in the middle of our argument. My sister immediately started crying and telling them how I'd abandoned her daughter. But I explained the whole situation, including the pattern of behavior I'd noticed over the past few months. My dad looked at my sister with disappointment and asked if it was true that she'd been lying about needing the bathroom just to get breaks. My sister stammered and admitted that sometimes she did need a few extra minutes to herself. My mom told her that wasn't fair to me or to her daughter. My parents made her apologize to me and told her that if she needs breaks from parenting, she needs to ask honestly instead of tricking people. They also said that if she pulls this stunt again, she can find her own place to live. My sister hasn't asked me to watch my niece for 2 minutes since then. Now when she needs a break, she actually asks properly and gives a realistic time frame. I thought I knew all the basic rules of parking. Check for signs, look for painted lines, don't block anyone in. My dad always taught me to be respectful in parking lots since they can get crazy busy, especially at shopping centers. I usually try to park further away to avoid door dings and give myself more space to practice my parallel parking skills, which honestly still need work. Yesterday morning, I decided to hit up the shopping center near my apartment to grab some groceries and maybe browse around a few stores. It was around 10 a.m., so not too busy yet, but not completely empty either. I drove around looking for a decent spot and found one in the fourth position of a row. Nothing special about it, just a regular parking space between the white lines. I did my usual check, no signs posted anywhere nearby, no blue paint on the curb, no wheelchair symbols on the ground. Just a normal spot like any other. I pulled in and turned off my engine, then sat in my car for a few minutes, scrolling through my phone to check my shopping list. The weather was nice, so I wasn't in any rush to get out. After about 5 minutes, I grabbed my purse and started walking toward the row of stores. That's when I heard someone calling out to me. I turned around and saw this older guy, probably in his 70s, sitting in his car a couple spots down from where I parked. He had his window rolled down and was waving at me to get my attention. He asked if I had a blue tag while holding up what looked like a handicap parking permit and tapping it against his dashboard. I told him no, I didn't have one. His whole demeanor changed instantly. His face got angry and he started pointing at me. He told me that I didn't belong in that spot and that he did. He was pointing at himself while saying this like he was some kind of parking authority or something. I was confused because I had no idea what he was talking about. I said sorry but explained that there weren't any signs around, and it was just a regular parking spot. I pointed toward my car and the area around it to show him what I meant. I told him there were plenty of handicap spots in the other rows on both sides if he needed one. But I also said that if he really needed this specific spot for some reason, I didn't mind moving my car. I meant it too. I'm not the type to cause problems over a parking space, especially if someone actually needed it more than me. But something about his attitude was rubbing me the wrong way. He wasn't asking nicely or explaining why he needed that particular spot, he was just demanding it like he owned it. The old man just stared at me without saying anything, so I decided to walk back to my car to double check the area. Maybe I missed something. I looked all around the spot again, checked the curb, looked for any faded paint I might have overlooked, scanned for signs on nearby poles or walls. Nothing. I called out to him that there were definitely no signs or markings here and that this was just a regular parking spot. He didn't respond at all. Instead, he just started his car and drove off without another word. I stood there for a moment feeling completely bewildered. The whole interaction lasted maybe 2 minutes, but it left me wondering what that was even about. Here's the thing that really got to me. There were actual handicap spots available in the rows on either side of where we were. I could see at least 3 or 4 empty ones from where I was standing. If this guy really needed handicap parking, he had legitimate options right there. But for some reason, he was fixated on my regular, unmarked parking spot. I started thinking about possible explanations. Maybe he always parked in that same spot and considered it his. Maybe he thought any spot close to the stores should automatically be reserved for people with handicap permits, regardless of whether it's actually designated. Or maybe he was just having a bad day and took it out on the first person he saw. The strange part was how he drove off once I offered to move, and then confirmed there were no signs. If he was genuinely confused about the parking situation, wouldn't he have appreciated me checking? If he really needed that spot for accessibility reasons, wouldn't he have explained why? Instead, he just left without any explanation. I went ahead with my shopping, but I kept thinking about the interaction. Part of me wondered if I should have just moved my car immediately to avoid the confrontation, but another part of me was glad I stood my ground. I offered to move if he needed it, I checked to make sure I wasn't missing any signs, and I tried to help him find legitimate handicap parking. When I came back to my car about an hour later, I noticed that same old man parked in one of the actual handicap spots 2 rows over. So he did find appropriate parking after all. It made me even more confused about why he was so insistent on my regular spot in the first place. The whole thing was just bizarre. And now we have reached the end of today's stories. Thank you for watching, and see you next time.